welcome to Crime in Court. This is the 1996 Menendez brothers trial. We've been reading through the transcript, although today we're going to take a little break. One, because I'm still not feeling the best after, recovering from this flu. I still feel like garbage. But just recently, just yesterday, this podcast came out and it's the Two Angry Men podcast. This is Harry Levin from TMZ and Mark Garagos, who hosts this podcast. Mark Garagos is the attorney for the Menendez brothers. And on this podcast, the brothers actually call in from prison, and we're going to hear a whole bunch in this conversation. They're going to talk about the resentencing hearing that's coming up in 28 days from now. So, um, today is February 20th. It is going to be March 20th is when we're having the first day of the two-day resentencing hearing take place. So that's coming up very soon. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about, or they are going to talk about the Monsters series a little bit. They're going to talk about, what prison's like a little bit. So we're going to hear a little bit from them. I thought it was a great interview. Let's get into it. Let me make sure we got captions on and let's go.
Welcome to Two Angry Men. I'm Harvey Levin.
I'm an angry Mark Garagos.
You
today.
are indeed. You are
I'm
indeed.
very angry today. I don't know what got into it. But you reminded me that you never would have guessed that we would have ended up here 30 years ago, because I remember vividly where I was screaming at you 30 years ago.
That actually, you may be confused because you did that regularly for many, many years. So it is odd. But here we are, and we are almost a month to the day away from a hearing that is going to determine the fate of the Menendez brothers for the rest of their lives. You are their lawyer. You are going to ask a judge essentially to free them, either by resentencing them or by changing the conviction. We're going to bring the Menendez brothers on in a couple of minutes. But first, how are you feeling about this right now?
On the resentencing, so people understand, on the resentencing, the state of the law in California is basically you look at how much time they've served, you look at how they have done while they've been in custody, and you look at whether or not the prognosis and what the prognosis is for if they are released. Under those kinds of circumstances, I can't think of two people better suited to be released under resentencing. I mean, that's the state of the law. And so I know that everybody always wants to fixate on this detail of the crime or that detail of the crime. That's a different calculation legally. That's not the legal standard for resentencing.
So joining us right now by phone at the prison are Erik and Lyle Menendez. Erik and Lyle, first of all, welcome to our podcast.
Hi, Harvey. This is Erik. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me on. Do you want to say hi to Lyle real quick?
I would like that. Hey, Lyle.
Hey, Harvey. It's Lyle.
How you doing?
I'm doing okay. Just here with Erik, so it's always good. We spend each day together, so we love it.
It's interesting that you were apart for many, many years, but you've come back together.
21 years, Harvey. 21 years.
That you hadn't seen each other.
Right.
Wow.
We talked about that. We went through all of that in the post-trial stuff when we did the 1993 trial. We went through all the post-trial stuff and how they were separated for 21 years and then finally reunited.
So your lawyer is my co-host, and he is on right now. So, Mark, I know you just spoke with them.
I did. We just got off. We had I would characterize it as a very productive call. Wouldn't you, Lyle?
Yes. of course.
without
And
revealing,
well,
we're not revealing any attorney-client, especially with Harvey
I
here.
know better than to ask that.
Yes.
Hey, Lyle, I'm really interested in something that this resentencing hearing was supposed to go down in December. It was then postponed to January, and then because of the LA fires, it's now pushed to March. So this must be difficult for you guys because it will determine the rest of your lives, and there has been delay on delay. So how are you guys holding up to this?
it's. I think we're mostly dealing with the reactions of our family, who are very anxious, and the delays are very upsetting for them. Particularly since we have my two aunts are elderly and not in the best of health, and so there's a lot of anxiousness.
That was just a picture of some of his family. So that is, I can't tell who that is. It's one of their aunts here.
And not in the best of health, and so there's a lot of anxiousness in the family because of that something might happen before something good could happen. For Erik and I, we've been incarcerated 35 years, and we've sort of developed a peace and a patience that might not make much sense to someone who's free. So we kind of understand it.
That's a very astute point, because I've been amazed at I know, and it's almost, I do it a disservice when I call it a Zen-like or Job-like patience, but you guys you've kind of reached a point where you've got a very kind of interesting perspective on just on time itself.
Right, and we try to live for the day. We're very hopeful, but this time counts, and so we've done what we can with the time that we have, and you never know how long you'll be blessed to be on the earth. So we don't just sit around waiting for something. So that keeps us motivated.
Lyle, I'm really interested in what you and Erik.
Basically, they find their own purpose. They're not going to sit around and just rot and not be productive with their lives. As we know, they've done so much while incarcerated to better the lives of themselves, of other prisoners, of individuals who have suffered trauma, which most people in prison probably have at some point in their lives. So, I mean, all of us probably have experienced some trauma in some form or another. So, even though they're dealing with a specific kind of trauma, the way to heal from trauma is still the same. So, that can still be applied to other individuals in prison, even if they weren't essayed as children.
Erik have to say about this. I know Erik's standing next to you, but let me ask each of you this. You mentioned that you're hopeful. That amazes me. Hope seems like kind of an elusive thing when you're sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. So how do you keep that alive? And it also goes to the fact that you've got you've worked on getting a college degree. You've worked with other prisoners there. You've worked on this green space project. How do you develop hope when the sentence is until death?
It was very difficult in the beginning for me, but through Erik and I have been blessed in that we're not unknown that we're here, so we receive a tremendous amount of mail, and that connection with the public and with others who have maybe experienced similar trauma in their childhood or at some point in their life. Very motivating, very inspiring, and so a lot of what Erik and I have done is along those lines of working with other victims or working with victims in here or being part of groups or creating groups along those lines. So a lot of the fulfillment and motivation just comes from that. Hope for the future is really kind of a new thing for us, I think. I think Erik would probably agree with that. It's not something that we spend a lot of time on. It's a very new concept for us, this idea of hope for freedom. we mostly just focus on the day, on the present.
Up until about 2 years ago, with the habeas petition that they put forth, they didn't have an option to be released. They didn't have the resentencing in front of them. They didn't have the habeas petition. They didn't have all these options that are available to them now. So this is like the first time that they're hopeful that they actually might be released from prison in quite some time because their appeals ran out long time ago.
On what we can do to sort of feel good about that day.
Could I ask Erik the same thing?
Yes, sure.
Erik? Erik?
I'm here.
I'm,
Yes.
I asked Lyle this. I'm so curious. How do you maintain hope when you have a sentence that basically takes you to death's door? Because that's the sentence, right? And that has been for a long time, for 35 years. So you guys have done things in that prison that really kind of, for me, kind of shock me that it's trying to make your life productive. How do you do that?
Well, that was a journey. So I didn't start out with that mindset. When I first came to prison, I wasn't just sentenced to prison. I was sentenced to prison to never see my brother again, to never have a hope for freedom. And
if you recall, he was already such an emotional mess from everything leading up to the crimes, and then after the crimes, he was just riddled with guilt, and he was extremely depressed. He wanted to take his own life. So coming into that and then having your brother taken away from you and knowing that you're never getting out, that's enough to destroy anybody's soul.
to fend for myself in a very violent level 4, which is considered a maximum security prison, where I didn't know anyone, and I'm 600 miles away from any place that I'd ever really been to. So I was very alone, afraid, and prison was hard for me. I faced a lot of bullying and trauma. It was a dangerous environment, and fortunately, I had the love of a woman that came into my life and brought a little precious daughter.
That's his wife, Tammy. They are married. They've been married since, oh gosh, I can't remember the date, but it's been, I think, since the 90s. Kind of want to say the 90s with that hairdo, but definitely they've been together for quite some time. And Tammy has a daughter from another relationship who Erik is now her stepfather, and they have a very close relationship.
And I began to experience fatherhood and growth and begin to heal a lot of the self-hate and self-loathing that I dealt with all of my life. So when I came to prison, I didn't come to prison healed. I came to prison dealing with the traumatic wounds of my past, the tragic crime that resulted that I committed, and I had to face all of those truths and somehow journey through that dark place of prison and try to figure out my traumas. Very, very difficult for me. A lot of starts and stops, and frankly, it was very difficult.
Healing from trauma is a process. And like you said, starts and stops. You make progressions and then you regress and then you do it all over again because you got to keep going and keep pushing yourself forward. So healing happens in stages and you can go from good to bad in 5 seconds.
When I began to really work on myself and realize that I'm not flawed, that I'm not defective, that there isn't something inherently wrong with me, then light began to open up, really. And I began to love myself again, and that was
Amazing.
a really important journey for me. And that frankly is what has given me hope. Is that if for people that are victims of severe childhood trauma, we live in the shadows, in this inner pain, in this silence where we have self-humiliation and self-condemnation and self-loathing. And so a lot of my freedom came from understanding that I'm actually someone that's capable of being loved, that I deserve love, and that I'm not that person
You have 60 seconds remaining.
inherently flawed and defective. And so understanding that is a kind of freedom. And I helping others go through that journey and realize that they're not flawed and defective just because of the traumas of their childhood. It's frankly something that is extremely rewarding. It's what I want to do for the rest of my life. And that's what gives me hope. It's what I want to do in prison. It's what I'm doing in prison, and it's what I want to do out of prison. Is not have people suffer in that silence and live in the shadows and live in their traumas, but realize that they are survivors, and that we now have a culture that can embrace trauma and move through it. So that gives.
Isn't that incredible? Like hearing him from, we all watched him on the stand, and how awful and painful that was to have to watch him suffer through all of the, reliving all the stuff that he had been through. And here we are, this is 35 years later, and these brothers are so self-aware. They're so mature in their thoughts and in their ideas about trauma and SA and childhood trauma and how to heal. They're just so wise. They just sound so wise beyond their years now, is what I'm saying. Like they've lived it, they've been through it, and now they're on the other side of it. And I think their healing and their journey and their release, once that happens, is going to open up even more opportunities for them to help people who are in struggling through trauma.
Gives me tremendous hope for where we are going.
If we get disconnected, are you able to call back?
Probably not, because they've been out of pocket for a period of time.
I think it got disconnected.
You have a prepaid call from.
Guys, are you there?
I'm here. This is Erik.
Hey, Erik. I want to ask you something else. You kind of alluded to this, Erik. What specifically would you like to do if you get out? What are your goals?
Well, my first goal is to reconnect with a family and be with family. I have a wife that stood by me for 25 years, and she deserves me home, a daughter, and my extended family. So that's the first thing I want to do is try to bring about a lot of healing in our family through just me being home and sitting down and hugging and spending time with the people that I love.
By the way, could I interject? What a remarkable family you really have. I've spent so much time with them, and and when I say remarkable, that word probably doesn't do it justice, right?
I've been blessed, and Lyle has been blessed with an extraordinary family. And I have an elderly Aunt Terry and an elderly Aunt Joan, and I very much want to hold them free. I want to hug them and cry with them.
That was Joan. So the other aunt, I believe that was Terry.
And be with them and spend quality time that I have left with them, and that's extremely important for me. The most important thing. What it is that I want to do in terms of my day-to-day life is much of what I'm doing in here. I started a hospice program in here, a life care and hospice, where we talk about growing older, the struggles that you have in dealing with disability and with life-limiting illnesses. I want to and fully intend to be working with that community, and I want to continue the AVP program, the Alternative to Violence program that we're doing in here. I want to do that out there. But the primary focus for me is the childhood trauma community. I want to be an advocate for people that are suffering in silence. And the letters that I get thousands of letters from people who describe horrific childhood trauma that they have endured, that they are ashamed to speak out of, and that's just got to end. I don't want to live in a world where people are hidden in the silence of their shame anymore. And there should be no reason that the victims of such tremendous childhood trauma are trapped in that shame and that silence that I was trapped in for decades. And I am passionate about wanting to speak out and work with survivors of childhood trauma. And
That's what I'm saying. Like, if he was not in prison, he could be doing like tours and going around the world and telling people, you don't have to live like this. You can, you don't have to you don't have to take my choices to get out. There's other opportunities. There's other ways to, free yourself from your perpetrator. But isn't this amazing? Like, I really feel that if they were released, they would um, be out there and in the public eye and really advocating for reform for prisoners because of what they've been through and how they've suffered in prison and didn't have opportunities for help with dealing with their trauma. So I think they are going to do really great things if they are let out.
find new ways for us to heal, speak out, and prevent that type of trauma from happening to other people. And that includes working with Mark and other significant lawyers, Lyle, and dealing with what some of the ills that are in the criminal justice system. There are people who have been in prison for 48 years. I have a roommate that's one of them, and that does not need to be in prison anymore. There are people that the system is failing, and I want to help people that the system is failing. So Lyle and I aren't talking about leaving prison. Should we be able to get out and not looking back, our lives will be spent in working with the prison and doing the work that we're doing in here out there.
Could you pass the phone to Lyle?
Yes, he's right here.
Harvey,
Hey, I'm really...
little brother grew up pretty well, huh?
He clearly has a purpose if he gets out. What's yours? What's yours?
We have pretty much a shared purpose, in terms of the victims community. For decades, it's something that we've been involved with, and a lot of our joy, a lot of our grief is come from that community. So we have a phrase we call "speaking shame," and it's helping people find their voice in their trauma. I was the first person to testify in front of a national audience about male sexual abuse. I received a lot of ridicule in the 90s about it, but also a lot of support and a lot of victims reaching out, appreciating that, and finding their voice through mine. So that sort of inspired us to keep doing that. And we think that there's a hunger for that in the country. We would love to be part of that and heal in that way. The other passion I have is Green Space, the Green Space Project, and working with corrections to find ways to lower recidivism. Because Erik and I have spent 30 years with a life without sentence watching people parole and come right back, parole and come right back. It's a crisis in the country. It's creating more victims, as well as destroying the families of the inmates that have to come right back. And so corrections is looking for, Governor Newsom has an amazing initiative to change the culture of corrections. He calls it the California model. And one of them is this idea of finding a way to create community within the prison facility. So I founded a group with the idea of redesigning the entire prison facility so that it's like a college campus with trees and outside classrooms and wellness circles and areas where people could find community and start changing their life in a way to become a good neighbor. And so that's our major project.
Why are our prisons not all doing this? It just doesn't make sense to me that we're just continuing to go along with what we've been doing and nothing's been changing or improving for the better. Whereas this can make real differences in the prisoners' lives and the families' lives of the prisoners.
Project with the Green Space Project that you sometimes hear about. It's going to be a couple of year project. And if we're blessed enough to be free, we've been told we can come back and continue to finish that project and expand it throughout the system. So we're very excited about that.
So cool.
I want to ask you a question that's sort of in the TMZ wheelhouse, just because so many people have talked about this Ryan Murphy limited series on you and Erik. Do you have any opinion about it? Were you able to see it based on what you know? What do you think?
We were able to see quite a bit of it. I watched some of it through video chat that they allow us to do here, and obviously we've seen a million clips of it on TV and heard about a lot about it. So we feel like we've seen the entire thing. We have not yet. But, to me, it's just a funny thing. The media and Ryan Murphy's project was very widely disseminated, and it really did actually move a lot of people to understand the childhood trauma that Erik and I suffered, and particularly the horrific stuff that Erik suffered. Cooper Koch's rendition of Erik and his trauma was pretty extraordinary.
Mm-hmm.
And so was actually Nicholas's. So I feel, I feel in the end, a lot of people.
Cooper Koch, who played Erik in the Monster series, he's been very vocal. He's actually gone to visit Erik in the prison, and he's been very vocal about the brothers' release and, being an advocate for them. Whereas Nicholas, who plays, I can't remember his last name, who plays Lyle, he's kind of playing both sides, and he's never really said whether he believes that the brothers were abused or if they should be released. He doesn't really give an opinion. But Cooper Koch, who played Erik, very much an advocate for the brothers.
We're educated about what can happen even in rich, in affluent homes behind walls and behind hedges, and manicured lawns. And so I think it opened a lot of people's eyes, and that's always a good thing, Abuse, like my brother touched on it, it expands, it requires being in the shadows of society, because once you bring a spotlight on it, the bullying and the trauma tends to find healing or find recourse. And so I feel like shining a light on it, Ryan Murphy did, and his project ended up doing that. And so in that way, I think we are grateful.
Yeah. Could you pass the phone to Erik?
Sure, absolutely. Here's it.
I was gonna shut them down. So look at Harvey getting first opportunity.
Hey,
Yeah.
Erik, if you had to pick one moment that you could look back on while you were incarcerated, something you were proud of, what would it be?
I think in life we tend to highlight the thing that we've worked most on in trying to achieve. And obviously, 9 years ago, I put together Life Care and Hospice, and it's had a tremendous impact. So it's easy to point to something like that. But I've learned, as I've matured through the years, that our best moments are the ones that are not spoken about, that are not highlighted, that we do when we're alone and we just help somebody, or we help an animal, or we make somebody smile that's feeling down, that might have gone and harmed themselves if we weren't there. And those little moments happen in prison every single day, because there's so much trauma and so much tragedy and so much depression and sadness and self-loathing and self-condemnation. And so just being kind. I have a phrase that I like to use in Life Care and Hospice, that kindness is cool. kindness is cool, cool with a K,
Yeah.
and so just in those small things in the day, frankly, I believe they add up to what is a successful life. And it's easy to point to, oh, this person made a lot of money, or this person had the right job, or this person achieved this or that. But really, are they a good person? And I hope they are. But our goodness is in the things that we don't even remember. You know, someone that comes up to you and says, "Hey, you gave me a smile when I was feeling bad," and you don't remember it. So it's in those daily moments that we find ourselves and we find the beauty of life. And so
I love that. And kindness is cool, guys. Be kind. I really, one of the things about doing this particular, being out there and talking about these cases, I don't like the crazy trolls that come at you on social media and stuff. And I don't like to get engaged and I don't like to engage with them. And, I don't like to be mean and insult people. So it really irritates me when people do it just so blatantly on social media and then I don't know, it's annoying. I I always try to be like, just spread more kindness or block them because sometimes it's better for your sanity if you just block the trolls. But overall, like I try to be more kind on social media, but it doesn't always work with, the crazies. But kindness is cool. That's all I was trying to get at. I like it. Spread more kindness, spread more, be nice. Just, it doesn't cost anything to be nice. Just be nicer.
I would point to any of those little moments rather than anything that I can say, oh, look at me, I must be a good person because I did that. When I don't think that's what defines you.
You know, I'm going to say
So
I'm going to say something to you, Erik, that it's my opinion, um, and I'm kind of shocked by this listening to both you and Lyle. Um, I covered your trial, and a lot came out in the trial where a lot of people ended up saying, well, these are spoiled brats. They bought all this stuff and all that. And I listened to both you and Lyle now, and I just hear different people from what I remember covering that case.
Hmm.
Um, do you feel that? I mean, do you feel an evolution? Because I'm hearing it, and having covered the trial, I feel like I'm talking to two completely different people.
I do. I grew up in an affluent home. I was a spoiled brat. I had deep insecurity issues and tried to hide those issues, and I was taught that you do it through the best clothes or the best car or whatever of those things that we now know is completely dysfunctional and
Hmm.
frankly just a sign of internal pain. So and I was also a teenager, and so I look at teenagers now and I think if I were to see an 18-year-old come onto a prison yard now, I would think that person's not safe. Like I don't look at that person and say, oh, you have all of your stuff together and you know what's going on and you have a good sense of self. So
True.
I think that my youth and deeply misguided, imprinted ideas of what success meant in life were reflected in your sentiment. And I'm not surprised that you felt that way. I look back and I'm so ashamed and embarrassed about even the little things that I did in life. And I'm not sure anyone looks back on their teenage years and is really fully proud of themselves. Maybe you are, Harvey. I'm sure Mark is. But
I'm sure Mark is too.
I'm not that person. But who I've evolved into, who I've seen Lyle evolve into, uh, I'm 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 beginning to like myself and be proud of myself and find it okay to like myself and not hate
You have 60 seconds remaining.
what happened to me as a child. So I think that's an accurate sentiment, and I would I'm striving to be a good person, and I'm striving to be a better person every day, and I want to be a person that my family can be proud of for certain. I want my daughter to be proud of me, and my wife to be proud of me, and my extended family to be proud of me, and my brother to be proud of me. And so that's who I am today. Let me have Lyle say goodbye to you, Harvey.
Appreciate it.
Goodbye, Erik. I'll
Bye,
talk
Erik.
to you later.
Oh. Hey, guys.
Hey, Lyle.
Harvey.
So last thing, you got about 15 seconds. Are you hopeful for next month for the hearing?
My brother and I are cautiously hopeful, and we're just, we're in prayer with our family, and we're hopeful, and we're just trying not to go a little crazy in the interim, like you said. Just try to just stay.
Thank you, Lyle.
Thank you, Lyle. That was kind of symbolic of the circumstances there, that you have a certain amount of time and you get cut off.
This is Global Tellink. You have a prepaid call from
Lyle Menendez.
We accept the charges.
Hey.
Hey
Sorry
there,
about that.
Lyle.
Yes.
So, Lyle, you're gonna wrap it up. So what?
That sounds like an order more than a discussion.
Going to wrap it up. But the one thing I want, something that has struck me about the Green Space Project, which I didn't realize. Would you describe this kind of phenomena that happens in prison when you don't have something like the Green Space Project? And I'm not just talking the idea of the cycling in and out of recidivism. I was talking about, or you've taught me about, this idea of flat land and gray walls. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, it's a crass analogy, but we have the service dog program here, where the inmates teach service dogs to work with autistic children and with veterans, wounded veterans, and you can't. These dogs, if you can't expect any sentient being, and even a service dog, to be socialized in a very productive way if their living environment that they go back to on their off hours is very aggressive and oppressive. And human beings particularly are very sensitive to messaging. And so really at its foundation, the Green Space Project is just, you have to create a living environment for a prisoner that mirrors that rehabilitative purpose that you hope is inspiring him to change his life. And that can't be 30-foot gray walls, barbed wire, and concrete.
Mm-mm.
It has to be green and inviting and have a
I did just do that.
sense of community. And so that is really what we're trying to create here. And I wanted to show that you
Come on.
didn't have to spend $1 billion building a new prison to do that in the Norwegian model of corrections like they have in Norway that's been so successful. You could take an existing yard and you could change that facility. And we did it all through public donation because we didn't want to spend any taxpayer money on it, and to show that it could be done at first. And I think we're going to do that this year. And we're proud of it.
Speaking of the service dogs, that also struck me. There is, I guess it's the dormitory where the dogs actually are there, and to watch the inmates interact with these dogs it's jarring in a way, isn't it?
It's amazing. I mean, you have inmates who've been down, they've been locked up for 20 years. It's been 20 years since they touched the dog. And so that moment, that moment for me. I got here in 2018. I had not been in the same space with a dog or animal of any kind since 1989.
Wow.
Right? So the first moment I was able to see a dog wagging his tail, come up, lick your hand, it was an incredible moment. That's why it's such an amazing therapeutic program. And it's one of the reasons that I fought really hard to be allowed to install full-size trees on this prison yard because I had a friend of mine who paroled, Honore Brown. He's a rapper called X-Rated, and he did about 20-something years. And I asked him, what was the most amazing thing about being free when you first got out, expecting it to be that first meal or, seeing it, or some kind of social event or maybe even as well. And for whatever reason, he told me the first time he walked up and touched a tree.
Hmm.
And that just sort of stuck with me, like, wow. And I thought, you know what? If that is that cathartic an experience for him, that humanizing an experience for him, why should the prisoner have to wait? If it has that kind of effect on a prisoner, let it be part of changing his life here. And let's put trees back on prison yards like they used to be 50 years ago. And the director of prison design looked at me. He was in my room here, our beautification room, and he said, you know what, Lyle, let's bring trees back to California prisons. And so we're going to do that right here.
I love it.
Wow.
Amazing.
Lyle, thank you so much for talking to us. Could I ask Erik one more question? There's something he said earlier that I just can't get out of my head.
Yes, for sure. Hold on a second, Erik. I'm here, Harvey.
Hey, Erik. I have one other question. And when you said it at the beginning, 20 or 30 minutes ago, it really hit me. And I was thinking, you were behind bars as a very young man, and you talked about being mercilessly bullied. What happened to you?
I will say that I was picked on, bullied violently, and it was traumatic, and it was continual. And there's the things that a lot of inmates in prison go through, and when they're not part of a gang structure and they come in and they're basically lone wolf, they just have to be by themselves, and so it added a great deal. Prison can be hard, and there's a lot of suffering in prison. So, and I wasn't, I'm not going to fight back. I'm not going to, engage. And I had no one to really to turn to for help. And I was separated from Lyle. And I remember the day that I was told Lyle just got assaulted and got his jaw broken, and it was. I'm thinking, he's over there, I'm going through this over here, and at least we could protect each other maybe if we were together, but we were not even allowed to be together. So it was difficult, and it didn't, that's why it took years to work out of it, because you have to find yourself in prison. And I will say that prisons, I believe that corrections is doing their best, and I want to work with them. I know Lyle is, of really changing that culture today. They're really trying, but 25 years ago, it was an even darker, more dangerous place.
Okay, well, look, we really appreciate you and your brother spending time with us, and to be continued next month in court. Erik, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really
Thank
appreciate
you
it.
Okay. I'll say goodbye. Thank you all.
Thanks again.
Thank you for everyone that is praying for us and supporting us and wishing us the best. Lyle and I are deeply grateful, and our family is deeply grateful. And let's just be kind to each other in the process, and really love each other in the process. So let's hope for the best and see what happens. I really appreciate you guys, and I'm going to go now.
Thank you
Bye
again.
now.
Thanks again, guys.
Wow.
I got to tell you,
Wasn't that an amazing interview? I mean, so much that we learned from them, so much that, like I said, they're so mature. They've had so much time away from the crimes and from their childhood to actually reflect. They're so self-reflective. They understand. They're self-aware of what they've been through, how to heal, how to help others. And I think that they are amazing for what they've been through and everything that they've had to deal with their whole lives. It's amazing that they are in the space that they're in and able to so eloquently talk about it and act on it, do things to help improve the prison for others. So it's amazing. There's a little talk, they have a little bit of discussion here, the two of them, Harvey and Mark. So let's let that play out and then just a few minutes. That's
I
okay.
am shocked. I'm just shocked at how mature and thoughtful
Hmm.
um, and different they are. It's really stunning, Mark. I mean, you may be used to it because you represent them, you talk to them all the time, but this is a vastly different picture from 35 years ago.
It's amazing how far the culture has come. It's also amazing how far they have come. And I think your observation is true. And they have taken this, almost what are they? They're closer to 4 decades than three now, and they've used their time wisely.
Yeah.
So, what do you think's going to happen? You know who the judge is. You now know who the DA is, who seems much more non-committal than the previous
Nathan.
DA. What's your gut?
Nathan Hockman, we see you. We don't like you. We don't like what you're doing, how you're not answering. First of all, he hasn't answered the habeas petition that he's supposed to respond to. And he keeps asking for extensions on that. And he's also been very non-committal, like he said, regarding whether he's going to advocate for the brothers' resentencing or not, which, as we know, the former DA, George Gascon, had started the process in his office, and then election time happens, we get a new DA, and now he really doesn't seem to be interested in the Menendez case other than to politicize it for his own good, I guess.
My gut is, look, I've been doing this for 41 years, going on 42 years. If I wasn't a optimist, it's very hard to get up in the morning and do this. So I am the optimist that they've done their time. I've said it and I'll say it again. If they were the Menendez sisters, they would not be in custody. And it's
Mhm.
time. It's time for them to come home. When they talk about Terry, that's Jose's older sister. They talk about Joan, that's Kitty's older sister. You hear people say, "What about Kitty?" And I always say, look, if Kitty's older sister wants them out, and if Jose's older sister wants them out, who are we to be one of the haters that says no? And
Exactly.
once you listen to them, once you talk to them, I mean, it's, I was a sociology and anthropology major, and my father used to tell me that and a nickel gets you a cup of coffee. But it's very hard to predict anything in the world. But one of the things that I can predict is these guys have as low a chance of recidivism as any two humans that are in custody.
Yeah. Well, that was extraordinary to listen to them.
Hmm.
It really was, and especially um, juxtaposing many, many years ago with today. It is day and night.
Was just thinking about the Saturday Night Live 50-year anniversary. And when you take a look at what Saturday Night Live, the way they were caricatured back then, would never be done now. And
Hmm.
that's part of the evolution kind of on the macro side. And it's just a fascinating place we find ourselves in. And I'm hoping that the good things happen in the next 30 days.
Do you
Yeah.
think it'll be a quick decision, or do you think there are going to be multiple hearings and this is going to drag on?
I'm hopeful that it's a quick decision. I mean, there's a lot of things going on, and I'm hopeful. I'll keep you posted, Harvey. Don't worry.
I'll be there.
Yeah.
All right, that is the end of that. I thought that was an excellent interview for us to go over just to see what's going on in the brothers' lives right now and how they're feeling. So, um, I don't know if they've done, I mean, I know they've spoken out from prison many, many times, but I don't know if they've done anything recently to talk about the resentencing and things like that. I know that they do utilize the press when they feel like it or, speak out. But I haven't heard anything about another interview recently. So I thought that was a good interview for us to go over. I'm trying to think if there's some other updates. I don't think so right now. Well, we'll get back into next week. We will get back into the trial transcript of the 1996 trial with I believe we left off with Perry Berman. We're in the middle of his testimony, so we'll continue that next week. Thank you guys so much for joining in and um, taking an interest in this case with me. I'd be interested in it with or without you guys here, so I'm glad to get your perspective as well. So let me know what you guys thought of this interview, and I will see you guys in the next episode. Take care. Bye now.